Lucas Prescott's small hand was gone, ripped from his father's grasp in a single distracted moment, and when Alexander turned back, his 7-year-old boy had vanished into the chaos of Lincoln Park. The sound of children laughing, mothers calling, and the faint music of an ice cream cart blurred into meaningless noise as panic struck Alexander's chest like a hammer. His world, built on wealth, control, and prestige, suddenly collapsed into the simplest, rawest fear any parent could know. His child was missing. Alexander Prescott, a man known across Chicago's elite circles for his chain of luxury hotels, was not used to losing control. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, stood calmly against ruthless competitors, and silenced entire boardrooms with a single cold stare. But now, in the middle of a sunny Saturday, surrounded by strangers in jogging suits and strollers, he was nothing more than a desperate father whose voice cracked as he shouted, "Lucas! Lucas!" People turned to look, some with curiosity, others with indifference. Time slowed. Every second stretched into eternity as his heart pounded against his ribs. He scanned the park benches, the fountain, the winding paths between the oak trees. Nothing. Not a glimpse of the little boy's red jacket. Then, suddenly, there was a flicker of movement by the carousel. Alexander's eyes narrowed. A tall figure dressed in a worn grey coat was walking swiftly away, and clutched in his rough hand was Lucas's fragile palm. The boy didn't scream, didn't resist. He was simply being led away by a stranger. Alexander's body froze, the air knocked out of his lungs. Who was this man? Why was his son so calm, as if hypnotized? The wealthy father felt his legs weaken, and for the first time in his life he was powerless. But it wasn't Alexander Prescott who saw them first. It wasn't his sharp instincts or his fortune that would bring hope in that terrifying instant. No, it was Nora Sullivan, the quiet maid who had worked in his mansion for years, often overlooked, often invisible. Nora had been there that day, bringing her niece to play in the park after finishing her morning shift. She recognized Lucas immediately, his bright red jacket bobbing beside the tall stranger. Something inside her chest snapped, an instinct older than fear, stronger than doubt. Without hesitation, she dropped her niece's hand, whispered, "Stay right here, sweetheart," and began to run. She didn't shout. She didn't waste time. Her eyes locked on the stranger, and her heart pounded as her feet pounded the gravel. She was just a maid in the Prescott household, a woman who scrubbed marble floors that reflected chandeliers she could never afford. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the little boy walking unknowingly into danger, and as she sprinted forward, she thought to herself, why isn't Alexander here? Why didn't he see? Perhaps, she realized, sometimes the ones closest are the blindest, and it takes someone invisible to see the truth. This was the day that would change everything. The fragile thread between a father and his son, the hidden courage of a humble woman, and the dark secret of a stranger who was more than he appeared to be. Because this wasn't just a story of a child found. It was a story of betrayal, of secrets long buried, and of a millionaire whose greatest fortune would not be his empire, but the loyalty of someone he never truly noticed until it was almost too late. I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give your like. It's very important to me. And leave in the comments which city or country you are listening to me from. Nora's feet pounded against the gravel path as she drew closer, her pulse racing not from fear, but from determination. She had seen too many things in her life to stand back now. In the neighborhood where she grew up on the south side of Chicago, she had watched children disappear in silence, parents screaming their names to the wind. She would not allow that to happen to Lucas Prescott, not today, not while she was breathing. "Sir." "Hey, excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp but controlled. The man in the grey coat did not turn. His pace remained steady, almost rehearsed, as though he had walked that path 100 times before. He led Lucas with the casual air of a parent. Yet there was something off, something in the way Lucas's little body leaned forward, not out of comfort but compliance. Alexander was still behind, his voice echoing across the lawn. "Lucas, Lucas!" But people only turned their heads, confused, uncertain who to help. He was too far, and the distance between him and his son was growing with each step. Nora pressed harder, weaving past the crowd, her breath burning in her chest. She called again, this time firmer. the kind of voice mothers use when danger is near. "Lucas, honey, it's me, Nora." That was when the boy's head turned. For a split second, his wide eyes lit with recognition. "Nora?" he whispered, his small voice breaking the illusion that everything was normal. The stranger's grip tightened. In that instant, the mask slipped. His jaw clenched, and his shoulders stiffened as though preparing for a fight. He glanced back, his eyes meeting Nora's, and a chill rippled through her spine. Those eyes weren't of a casual passerby. They were cold, calculating, and strangely familiar. She slowed her steps just enough to think, "Who is he? Why do I feel like I've seen him before?" Alexander, desperate, was closing the gap now, but still too far to intervene. His heart was thundering. The sight of his maid, racing toward the danger pierced him with something unfamiliar, shame. She was braver than he was in this moment. Finally, Nora lunged, her hand grabbing Lucas's arm. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she whispered fiercely, pulling him toward her side. The stranger resisted for only a moment, then shockingly released the boy. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "You don't understand," he muttered, low enough for only Nora to hear. "This boy doesn't belong to him." "Not entirely." Her breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" But before she could press, he stepped back, blending quickly into the moving crowd like smoke into the air. Within seconds, Damien Cole was gone. Nora clutched Lucas to her chest as Alexander finally arrived, falling to his knees beside them. His hands shook as he touched his son's hair, his voice breaking. "My boy! Lucas, my boy!" Lucas buried his face in his father's chest, trembling. "Daddy, I thought you didn't see me." But while Alexander held his son, Nora stood silently, her heart still hammering, not from the chase but from the words the stranger had left behind. This boy doesn't belong to him. Not entirely. What did that mean? Who was this man? And why, in the pit of her stomach, did she feel that this was only the beginning of something far darker than a simple abduction attempt? As Alexander clung to his son, whispering promises of safety, Nora knew one thing with certainty. She could no longer remain the invisible maid cleaning quiet halls. She was now a witness to something that could shatter the Prescott family forever. That night, the Prescott mansion stood in silence, its towering windows glowing faintly against the Chicago skyline. The laughter of the city outside felt cruel, mocking as Alexander sat alone in his study. The mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books and the expensive whiskey poured into his crystal glass did nothing to calm the storm inside him. His hand trembled as he lifted the glass, staring at the amber liquid as though it could hold the answers. Lucas had finally fallen asleep upstairs, clinging to his stuffed bear, but only after hours of tears and restless tossing. Alexander had promised him again and again, "You're safe now, I won't let anything happen to you." Yet the words felt hollow, even to him, because deep down Alexander knew he had failed. For the first time in his life, Alexander Prescott, the man who conquered markets and built empires, felt like nothing more than a coward who couldn't protect his only son. Meanwhile, in her small rented apartment across the river, Nora Sullivan sat awake too, replaying the scene in the park over and over. She could still see Damien Cole's eyes, that strange glimmer when he whispered, "This boy doesn't belong to him." The words gnawed at her. She pressed her hands together, whispering softly, "Lord, show me the truth. Don't let me ignore this." Nora wasn't a woman of wealth, but she was a woman of instinct. Life had hardened her, sharpened her sense of when danger lurked. She couldn't simply dismiss Damien's words. Something deeper was hiding beneath the surface. The next morning, Alexander summoned her to the mansion earlier than usual. He was standing by the grand piano when she arrived, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "Nora," he said abruptly, "I need to know exactly what you saw." Every word he said. Every look. "Don't spare me." She hesitated, her hands tightening on the strap of her bag. "Mr. Prescott," he said something strange, "that Lucas doesn't belong to you." "Not entirely." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander's jaw clenched, his chest rising sharply as though the air itself had betrayed him. He turned away, gripping the edge of the piano. "That's absurd," he muttered, almost to himself, but his voice lacked conviction. Nora noticed. His denial wasn't rooted in certainty. It was rooted in fear. "Do you know him?" she asked carefully. Alexander's shoulders stiffened. He stared at the polished keys of the piano, his reflection distorted in the black lacquer. "No," he said too quickly. "No, I've never seen that man in my life." But Nora wasn't convinced. She had spent enough years in that household to recognize when her employer was hiding something, and right now his silence spoke louder than any denial. As if to confirm her unease, Lucas shuffled into the room, still in his pajamas, his small voice trembling. "Daddy, that man." He knew my name. Alexander's face drained of color. He crouched down, clutching his son's shoulders. "What do you mean, Lucas? Did he talk to you before?" Lucas nodded slowly. "At the carousel." He said, "Lucas, let's go," like he already knew me. The room spun. Alexander rose quickly, his hands balled into fists. "It's not possible," he whispered under his breath. His eyes darted to Nora, searching for something, perhaps strength, perhaps judgment. And in that fragile moment, Nora realized the truth. Alexander Prescott wasn't just battling a stranger. He was battling a secret, one that had been buried long before Lucas disappeared in the park. The question was no longer who Damien Cole was, but how he was connected to the Prescotts and what he truly wanted. The following days were a blur of fear and restless suspicion inside the Prescott mansion. Security guards patrolled the gates. Cameras were installed on every corner, and Alexander barely let Lucas out of his sight. But even with all his wealth and all his precautions, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that he was being hunted, not just by Damien Cole, but by his own past. At breakfast, Lucas sat quietly pushing cereal around his bowl. "Daddy," he whispered, "why did that man know my name?" The innocence in his son's voice cut Alexander like a blade. He forced a smile, kissed the boy's hair, and replied, "He doesn't matter anymore, son. You're safe." But deep down he knew safety was only an illusion. Nora Sullivan moved through the mansion silently, but her mind never stopped working. Every time she dusted a shelf or carried linens upstairs, she caught glimpses of Alexander pacing, making hushed phone calls, and staring at papers he quickly shoved into drawers when she passed. Something wasn't right. The words of Damien Cole replayed in her ears. This boy doesn't belong to him. Not entirely. That night, unable to sleep, Nora sat by the window of her small room over the garage. She whispered to herself, "Who is Damien Cole? And why did Mr. Prescott look like he already knew?" She decided she could no longer stay silent. The next morning, as Alexander sat in his study, Nora entered hesitantly. "Mr. Prescott," she began, "forgive me if I overstep, but I can't ignore what happened. That man, he wasn't random. He knew Lucas. And I think you knew him too." Alexander's face hardened. "Nora, this is none of your concern. You've done enough by saving my boy. Leave the rest to me." But Nora didn't move. Her hands trembled, yet her voice steadied. "You don't have to trust me, sir. But I saw your face. You recognized him." The silence was unbearable. Finally, Alexander slammed his hand on the desk, his voice breaking. "Yes, I knew him. Years ago. His name is Damien Cole, and if he's come back, it means the past I tried to bury is clawing its way to the surface." Nora's heart pounded. "What past?" Alexander stared out the window, his jaw tight. "Before I married Vivian, before Lucas was even born, there were mistakes, choices I made with people I should never have trusted. Damien was one of them." He turned back, his eyes full of torment. "And now he's after my son." Before Nora could respond, the heavy footsteps of someone echoed in the hall. The door opened, and Vivian Cross, Alexander's ex-wife, stepped inside. Her presence was like a storm, elegant and cold, with her tailored coat and piercing eyes. "I heard every word," Vivian said, her voice laced with venom. "And you should know, Alexander, that Damien Cole isn't just from your past. He's from mine too." Nora's breath caught. The tension in the room was unbearable. Vivian's lips curled into a bitter smile. "If Damien has returned, it's because he's finally ready to claim what's his." Alexander's face drained of color. Nora clutched the edge of the table, her world spinning. What did she mean? What could Damien possibly claim? And then, like a cruel whisper in the air, the thought surfaced. Was Lucas truly Alexander's son? Or was there more to the story than anyone dared to admit? Vivian's words hung in the air like a blade suspended over their heads. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of silence pressing down on everyone. Alexander's voice was low, almost pleading. "Vivian, don't you dare, not here." Not in front of her. He flicked his eyes toward Nora, as though the maid's presence made his shame unbearable. But Vivienne only smiled coldly. Why not? She's already in the middle of this. If it weren't for her, Lucas would be gone by now. Maybe she deserves to know the truth more than you deserve to keep hiding it. Nora's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. If it concerns Lucas's safety, I need to know, please. Tell me. Vivienne's eyes glittered with bitter triumph. She leaned against the desk, her voice slicing like glass. Damien Cole isn't just a stranger from the past. He was once my lover, long before I married Alexander. And what Alexander has always feared, what he's tried so hard to erase, is that Lucas might not be his son at all. The words fell like thunder. Nora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Alexander staggered back, his face pale, his fists clenching as though trying to crush the truth itself. That's a lie. Alexander roared. Lucas is my son, mine. Vivienne tilted her head, savoring his rage. Is he? Or is he Damien's? Lucas's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. Daddy? He had been listening, small feet shuffling closer to the door. The innocence in that single word was unbearable. Nora rushed to the hallway, gently leading him back to his room before he could hear more. Her heart ached for the child caught in a storm he couldn't understand. When she returned, Alexander was pacing like a trapped lion, while Vivienne lit a cigarette with shaking hands. You've built your empire on appearances, Alexander, she hissed. But appearances crumble. Damien's return isn't random. He wants to claim what he believes is his, Lucas. Nora spoke softly, trying to steady her voice. So Damien thinks Lucas is his son. Vivienne exhaled smoke slowly, her eyes narrowing. Not just thinks. He's convinced, and now he'll stop at nothing. Alexander slammed his hand against the desk so hard the lamp rattled. Enough! Whether Damien believes it or not, Lucas is mine. I raised him, I love him. I won't let anyone, especially Damien, take him away. His voice cracked on the last word, and Nora caught a glimpse of something rare in him. Desperation. But Vivienne wasn't finished. There's more you don't know, she said coldly. Damien has proof. Letters, photographs, maybe even tests. He's been keeping them for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And if he goes to court, Alexander, your name and your empire will be dragged through the mud. The world will know. Nora's heart sank. This wasn't just about family. It was about reputation, power, legacy. Alexander Prescott had enemies in every corner of the city waiting for him to stumble. Damien's revelation could destroy everything. Not just his home, but his life's work, and yet, beneath all the wealth and the fear, Nora saw the real wound. Alexander wasn't terrified of losing his empire. He was terrified of losing Lucas, the one person who made him feel like more than a cold businessman. That night, Nora lay awake in her small room, whispering a prayer. Lord, guide me. If Lucas is truly Alexander's, give us strength. But if he belongs to Damien, let the truth come out in a way that doesn't destroy the boy. Tears slid down her cheeks. She knew she was no longer just a maid in this story. She was standing at the center of a storm that could shatter an entire family. And outside, in the shadow of the Prescott mansion, a figure stood silently beneath the streetlight. Damien Cole, watching, waiting, a small envelope clutched in his hand. The following morning, the Prescotts awoke to find a plain white envelope slid beneath the massive iron gate at the entrance of the estate. The security guards had missed the intruder, but the handwriting on the envelope was enough to send a chill down Alexander's spine. Bold, deliberate strokes spelled out, for Alexander Prescott. He tore it open at once, his hands shaking as Nora and Vivienne hovered nearby. Inside were 3 photographs, grainy, yellowed with time. One showed Vivienne and Damien together at a bar on the north side, her arm wrapped tightly around his shoulders. Another showed Damien holding a baby swaddled in blue. And the third, more recent, was terrifyingly clear. Lucas at the park just days ago, laughing on the carousel, while Damien stood in the background watching. Beneath the photos was a note scrawled in jagged ink. You cannot erase the truth. He is mine. Meet me at Navy Pier tonight, or the whole city will know. Alexander crushed the photos in his fist, his voice trembling with fury. He's playing games. He's taunting us, Vivienne scoffed, her lips curling bitterly. Games? No, Alexander. This is war. Damien has been patient all these years, waiting for the right moment. Now he's ready to destroy you. But Nora's eyes weren't on Alexander or Vivienne. They were on the photo of Damien holding the baby. She studied it carefully, the curve of the child's nose, the small hand peeking out of the blanket. It didn't prove anything. And yet something about the way Damien clutched that baby felt real, intimate. "Mr. Prescott," she said softly, "what if he's not bluffing? What if Lucas really—" She stopped herself, unable to finish the thought. Alexander turned on her, his face red with rage and pain. "Don't you dare, Nora, don't you dare question that boy's blood. Lucas is mine, mine." His voice cracked, echoing off the marble walls. For a moment, he looked less like a millionaire and more like a broken man fighting to hold his world together. That evening, against Nora's pleading, Alexander decided to meet Damien at Navy Pier. The Chicago skyline glittered across the water, carnival lights flashing in the distance, laughter and music filling the air. But beneath the surface of the lively pier was a current of menace, as if the night itself knew a storm was brewing. Nora insisted on coming, despite Alexander's resistance. "You need someone who isn't blinded by pride," she said firmly. "If this turns ugly, at least Lucas will still have someone to hold on to." At the end of the pier, Damien Cole stood leaning against the railing, the envelope of photographs tucked neatly under his arm. His presence was magnetic, dangerous, his smile sharp as he greeted them. "Alexander," he said smoothly, "still pretending the world bends at your command? You can't buy your way out of blood." Alexander's fists clenched. "Say what you came to say." Damien's eyes flicked to Nora, then back to Alexander. "Simple. I want recognition. I want the truth to be spoken. Lucas is mine, and I will not vanish from his life again. If you fight me, I will drag your name, your company, your fortune, all of it, into the gutter." Nora stepped forward, her voice steady though her heart pounded. "And what about Lucas? Have you thought about what tearing him apart will do to him? He's a boy, not a weapon in your fight." For the first time, Damien's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his gaze flickered. "I am his father," he growled, "and I have every right." Alexander's voice thundered back. "You have no right. You abandoned him, if he was even yours to begin with. I raised him. I loved him. You don't get to walk back into his life with scraps of paper and destroy everything." The tension snapped, like a wire pulled too tight. For a long moment, the three adults stood locked in a silent battle, the carnival lights flashing over their faces. Then Damien slid a folded document across the railing. "DNA doesn't lie. This is the beginning." Nora caught her breath as Alexander snatched the paper, his hands trembling. The truth was now out of the shadows, and the fight for Lucas's identity and his future had begun. The Prescott mansion was silent when Alexander returned from Navy Pier. The folded document clutched in his hand like a poisonous snake. He locked himself in his study, whiskey untouched on the desk, staring at the envelope Damien had given him. He couldn't bring himself to open it, not yet. To break the seal was to break his world. Nora stood outside the door, torn between duty and compassion. She could hear his heavy breathing, the soft thud of his fist against the wood desk, and she whispered to herself, "Lord, give me strength to stand in the middle of this storm." Hours later, Alexander emerged. His tie was loosened, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. "Nora," he said hoarsely, "I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, stay close to Lucas. Don't let him out of your sight." She nodded without hesitation. "I already promised myself that." Upstairs, Lucas was not asleep. The boy sat at the edge of his bed, his bear clutched tightly. "Nora," he whispered when she peeked in, "is Daddy mad at me? Did I do something wrong?" Her heart broke. She sat beside him, smoothing his hair. "Oh no, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. Sometimes adults carry secrets. Secrets they should have told long ago. But none of it is your fault." Lucas looked up with wide eyes. "That man at the park, he said my name like he knew me. Who is he?" Nora hesitated, but before she could answer, Alexander entered the room. He knelt in front of his son, his voice shaking. "Lucas, listen to me. No matter what anyone says, you're my son. You will always be my son." Lucas tilted his head. "But Daddy, am I yours by blood?" The question sliced Alexander in two. He closed his eyes, pulling his boy into his arms. "By blood or not, you are mine in every way that matters." His tears fell into Lucas's hair, and for the first time, the proud millionaire was just a father clinging to the only thing that gave his life meaning. But while father and son clung to each other, Vivienne was not so easily softened. She stormed into the study that night, slamming her purse onto the desk. You think love will be enough to save you? Damien has DNA proof. Do you know what that means? The court, the press, the vultures in your business will eat you alive. And Her voice cracked with venom. I won't shield you. Alexander's fury exploded. You started this, he shouted. Your betrayal, your lies, this is your doing. Vivian's hand shook as she lit a cigarette, her eyes narrowing. And you think Nora here can save you? A maid? Don't be foolish, Alexander. She's nothing in their world. Nora, who had been standing quietly in the corner, straightened her back. Her voice was steady, filled with quiet fire. Maybe I'm nothing in your world, Ms. Cross. But to Lucas, I'm someone he trusts. And right now, trust is more valuable than money or reputation. Vivian sneered, but she couldn't hide the flicker of unease in her eyes. The following day, the envelope could no longer remain sealed. Alexander opened it in front of Nora, his hands trembling as he pulled out the document. His eyes scanned the paper once, twice, and then his knees nearly gave way. The DNA results declared 99.8% probability. Damien Cole is the biological father of Lucas Prescott. The room spun. Nora caught the edge of the desk to steady herself, whispering, Dear God. Alexander's voice broke into a hollow whisper. He's not mine. He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, the mighty Alexander Prescott was utterly destroyed. But Nora's eyes shifted to Lucas's school drawings pinned to the wall, to the photographs of Alexander, carrying his son on his shoulders, teaching him to ride a bike, reading to him by the fire. Blood or not, those memories were real, and Nora knew. The battle ahead would not only be about truth, it would be about love, loyalty, and who truly deserved to be called father. Damien Cole did not waste a single day. As soon as the DNA results landed in Alexander's hands, Damien began his assault. Within a week, articles started appearing online, anonymous leaks hinting at a scandal in the Prescott family. Rumors swirled that the heir to the Prescott empire might not be a Prescott at all. Investors whispered. Business partners questioned. The proud name Alexander had spent a lifetime building trembled on the edge of collapse, but worse than the headlines was the battle within the house itself. Lucas sensed it first. Children always do. He overheard hushed arguments in the halls, saw the tightness in his father's jaw, the bitterness in Vivian's smirk. One afternoon he cornered Nora in the kitchen, his small voice trembling. Nora, is Mr. Cole really my dad? The question nearly broke her. She knelt beside him, cupping his face in her hands. Sweetheart, a father isn't just someone who gives you blood. A father is someone who stays. Someone who loves you, protects you, and calls you his no matter what. Lucas's lip quivered. So, Daddy Alexander is my real dad. She smiled softly through her own ache. In every way that matters, yes. Don't ever forget that. Meanwhile, Alexander faced a storm of his own. He shut himself in the boardroom with his attorneys, voice hoarse as he roared. He will not take my son. I don't care what the papers say. I don't care about blood. Lucas is mine. Yet when he returned home, his fury crumbled into quiet desperation, his eyes searching for his son with the same fear he'd felt at the park. Damien, however, grew bolder. He appeared outside Lucas's school, leaning casually against the fence, offering the boy a small baseball as if he were an old friend. The teachers called Alexander in a panic. We had to escort Mr. Cole off the property, they explained. But he said he was Lucas's father. Alexander's rage was volcanic. That night he nearly collapsed in Nora's presence, his voice cracking. He's poisoning everything, Nora. My son, my name, my life. I can't fight him alone. Nora's heart swelled with both sorrow and resolve. She had seen powerful men fall before, crushed by pride or lies. But Alexander's downfall was different, because this time a child's heart hung in the balance. She touched his shoulder gently, her voice steady. Then don't fight alone. Let someone stand with you. Let me stand with you. For the first time, Alexander looked at her not as a maid, but as an anchor in his collapsing world. He whispered, almost broken, Why would you do this for me? Nora's answer was simple. Because Lucas deserves better than secrets and war. He deserves a family, not a battlefield. Yet even as she spoke those words, she knew the storm was far from over. Damien Cole wasn't finished. His eyes were fixed on the Prescotts. And his next move would not be whispers or photographs. It would be something bigger, something public, something that would force the entire world to witness the unraveling of their lives. And in the stillness of her small room that night, Nora prayed again. Lord, let truth win, but more than truth, let love win. She didn't yet know it, but she was becoming more than a maid, more than a witness. She was about to become the protector, and perhaps the savior of them all. The storm broke on a grey Sunday afternoon. What began as a family outing turned into the moment that would decide everything. Alexander, desperate to restore a sense of normalcy, took Lucas to the annual Navy Pier Festival. He insisted on going without guards, without lawyers, without the suffocating shadow of his name. He wanted to prove, at least to his son, that he could still be a father in the simplest of ways. Nora, sensing the danger, came along too, her instincts refusing to leave the boy unguarded. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and fried dough, the sound of calliope music echoing through the carnival rides. Lucas's laughter, brief and fragile, returned as he clutched a balloon and tugged Alexander's hand toward the Ferris wheel. For a fleeting moment it felt as if the darkness had lifted, but then, like a shadow slipping through the crowd, Damien appeared. He stepped onto the midway with calculated ease, dressed sharply now, his eyes burning with possession. And he didn't come alone. 2 reporters trailed behind him, cameras slung over their shoulders ready to capture the fall of a Prescott. Alexander. Damien's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. Stop pretending. The truth belongs to everyone now. The crowd turned. People recognized the name Prescott, and whispers spread like fire. Alexander froze, Lucas clinging tightly to his arm, eyes wide with fear. Damien advanced, his voice rising. This boy, Lucas, is my son. The tests prove it. The world deserves to know the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters raised cameras, shutters clicking furiously. Alexander's jaw tightened, his chest heaving. You will not drag my son into this circus, he growled, pulling Lucas behind him. But Damien's eyes gleamed. You can't hide him anymore. Blood doesn't lie. He belongs to me. Lucas whimpered, Daddy? His small voice cracked under the weight of the shouting men. Nora crouched beside him, shielding him with her arms. Don't listen, sweetheart. Don't listen to any of this. The confrontation escalated. Alexander lunged forward, his voice booming. You abandoned him before he could even walk. You forfeited any right the day you left Vivienne behind. Damien snarled, his composure slipping. I didn't abandon him, I was forced out. You stole everything from me, Vivienne, my son, my life. His voice cracked with raw pain, and for a moment, beneath the rage, Nora glimpsed something terrifyingly human, a man who believed he had been robbed. Reporters circled closer, their cameras flashing like lightning. The crowd pressed in, murmuring, some pitying, others scandalized. Lucas cried out, Make them stop! And buried his face into Nora's shoulder. In that instant, Nora rose to her feet, holding the trembling child. Her voice, clear and unwavering, cut through the chaos. Enough, both of you! She looked at Alexander, then Damien, her eyes blazing. Do you even hear yourselves? You're tearing this boy apart, ripping him in two, as if he's a prize to be won. But Lucas is not a prize, he's a child. And he needs love, not war! The crowd fell silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. Damien's lips parted, his anger faltering. Alexander's fists unclenched, his breath ragged. Nora continued, her voice steady. If you truly love him, either of you, you'll stop fighting in front of strangers. You'll stop using him as proof or revenge or legacy. And you'll start asking what he needs. Lucas lifted his tear-streaked face, whispering through sobs, I just want to be safe. The words pierced both men deeper than any weapon. Alexander's eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. Damien staggered back as though struck, his expression breaking into something vulnerable, almost shattered. For the first time, both men realized the same truth. No test, no claim. No fight could erase the damage already done, and yet, standing in the eye of the storm, it was Nora Sullivan, the maid, the invisible heart of this fractured household, who had managed to remind them of the one thing they had both forgotten, the boy's heart. But the battle wasn't over. If anything, this public spectacle was only the beginning. Damien was wounded but not defeated. Alexander was broken but not finished. And Nora knew that the true decision, the one that would define Lucas's future, was still ahead. The scandal at Navy Pier spread across Chicago like wildfire. By nightfall, headlines flashed across every screen. Prescott legacy in question. Child at the center of family feud. Investors panicked. Neighbors whispered. And for Alexander Prescott, the walls of his empire felt as if they were crumbling brick by brick. Yet behind the noise of the world, the real storm was happening in the quiet halls of the Prescott mansion. Lucas barely spoke, his once bright laughter replaced by silence. He clung to Nora constantly, following her from room to room as if afraid she might vanish too. "Don't leave me," he whispered one night as she tucked him in. "Please, Nora, promise." "I promise, sweetheart," she said, kissing his hair, though her heart ached with uncertainty. Downstairs, Alexander sat with the DNA papers spread across the table. His hands covered his face. "He's won," he murmured. "Damien will take him. I'll lose everything." His voice was hollow. But beneath it, Nora heard something truer. Fear not of losing his empire, but of losing his son. The next morning, Damien arrived unannounced, standing boldly at the gates. This time he carried no threats, no photographers, only himself. He demanded to speak with Lucas. Against her better judgment, Nora agreed to bring him inside, but only under her watchful eye. The boy hesitated when Damien knelt before him. "Lucas," Damien whispered, his voice unexpectedly tender, "I'm your father by blood. I've waited years for this moment." Lucas looked at him, then at Alexander, who stood frozen in the doorway. The child's voice was small but certain. "You're not my daddy. Daddy is the one who stayed. Daddy is the one who reads me stories at night and holds me when I'm scared. Daddy is him." He pointed to Alexander, whose eyes filled with tears. Damien's face crumbled. The arrogance, the fury, all of it melted into grief. For years he had fed his rage, believing he was reclaiming what was rightfully his, but the truth was laid bare. Fatherhood wasn't written in blood alone. It was carved in sacrifice, in presence, in love. And he had none of that to give. "I only wanted to be seen," Damien whispered, his voice breaking. He rose slowly, his shoulders hunched, and for the first time, he looked less like a villain and more like a man haunted by choices he couldn't undo. Alexander stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Lucas. "You've been seen," he said firmly, but not without compassion. "And now you need to let him live." The moment passed like a storm losing its fury. Damien left the estate without another word, his figure swallowed by the grey Chicago morning. Perhaps he would disappear forever, or perhaps he would return in another form. But for now the battle was over. In the days that followed, reporters moved on to fresher scandals. The city found new gossip to feast on, and the Prescotts slowly began to heal. Lucas returned to his laughter, though he never let go of Nora's hand for long. One evening, as the sun set behind the skyline, Alexander found Nora in the garden. He stood awkwardly, uncharacteristically humbled. "You've done more for my son than I ever could have asked. More than I deserve. You've held us together when everything was falling apart." Nora looked at him, her eyes warm. "Lucas didn't need money or power, Mr. Prescott. He just needed love, and so did you. Maybe now you both can start over." Alexander nodded, his throat tight. "Not without you." The words hung between them, not as a command, not as an order from a master to a servant, but as a plea from a father, a man, to the woman who had become the quiet heart of his family. For the first time, Nora realized that perhaps her invisibility had been her greatest strength, because it allowed her to see what no one else could. And as Lucas came running across the grass, laughter echoing in the fading light, Alexander and Nora both knew. Bloodlines had nearly torn them apart, but love had stitched them back together. This story reminds us that family is not always defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Sometimes the ones who seem invisible are the ones who hold us together when the world tries to tear us apart. I'm John Parker, and I hope today's story touched your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share in the comments which city or country you're listening from. Your words help us reach more people who need stories like this.